I was reading an article in a science journal, and it was one of those front-of-the-book things. It was very short, and it didn't make a lot of sense. And I kept reading it, trying to understand what the problem was. And finally, I concluded that, when somebody writes a one-page piece that doesn't hold together, it's because they want to say something they don't feel they can say. And I thought, well, the only thing this guy would want to say is that global warming isn't real, and that's ridiculous. But at the next sort of opportunity between books, I decided to go online and look at the temperature record because I hadn't paid a lot of attention. I think when I started this, my views were highly conventional. They were pretty much like everyone else's. And all the temperature records are online. You can easily see what the situation is. And it wasn't very long before I began to have, substantial reservations. It simply wasn't clear to me why the last 30 years in which temperature has gone up in association with carbon dioxide should be considered more relevant than the previous 30 years where temperatures went down, even though carbon dioxide went up. And I just assumed that I must not understand, that there must be some other factor here that I wasn't getting because it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And so I looked with ever more attention to detail, and for better or worse, the more detail I got into, the less persuaded I was. I talked to actually very few climate scientists because I didn't want to, this is a very, very politicized area, and I didn't really want to have anybody influencing me. I thought I'm an outsider. I'm not side. I'm a political agnostic, and I think what's valuable is that I've come to my own conclusion here. But it was clear in the brief conversations that I had with the people who were doing the modeling that where we part company is I think what they're doing is terrific. I think that the climate research is in many ways sort of dazzling and extraordinarily, ambitious undertaking. I mean, this is a multi-generational computer modeling activity that's being done, and it's kind of fabulous, but it's simply not good enough to set policy on, whereas they, of course, think it is. And that was the essential difference. But, to the extent that there's controversy about my views, I must say it's really kind of amazing. I mean, because I never thought the idea that you can't predict the future would be controversial. Unfortunately, a lot of environmental thinking has taken on a fundamentalist tinge as if it were religious. That's bad for a number of reasons. The biggest one, I think, is that we really do need a good environmental movement. We really do have an environment that needs our attention. It really is not as good as it could be and should be. There are huge areas that we just don't have information. Not the areas that are usually talked about, because I think the environmental movement is not doing what it really needs to do. The environment is a complex system. And what we know now about how you interact with complex systems tells us that we can't really be sure what the effect is of any of our actions. And we have to be constantly monitoring, constantly probing, constantly re-examining what we've been doing, and all of that behavior, even to say, I don't know, all of that behavior is not suited to a fundamentalist philosophy. Fundamentalists are really good at saying, I know the answer and you don't. But when nobody knows the answer, then we better get into a more scientific headset and out of a more religious headset. If you look at the predictions of the Club of Rome, which was a group that did the early computer projections in 1973, they said we would run out of all sorts of raw resources by 1993. And we haven't run out of anything, which is not to say that we may not eventually, but it is to say that those predictions were significantly in error. And they also predicted that by the year 2020, we'd have a world population of 14 billion, and there isn't anybody who believes that we're going to get anywhere near that. When I look at modern society today, what I see is that politicians and media and lawyers, and don't forget, we have 3/4 of all the lawyers in the entire planet, so they're a phenomenally powerful group, that all these three really have a stake in the promotion of ongoing fears and crises. And there is no countervailing institution that has as its purpose or has a reason to stand up and say, no, Don't be afraid of that one. No, that one's fake. No, don't be buying into that. The poster child for false fears is, of course, Y2K, which is recent enough that most people can still remember it, and also was clear in the sense that for months, years really, we heard fears expressed about what terrible things are going to happen. Airplanes are going to drop out of the sky. Financial markets are going to collapse. People sold their houses. They withdrew all their money. They moved to higher ground. They bought guns. Nothing happened. I think that there is a kind of religious feeling that tends to be inherent in human beings. And I think that religious feeling, if it isn't in a church or a synagogue or a mosque, if it doesn't have its place there, it floats off and it attaches to other things. And one of the things that it's tended to attach to is our feelings about the environment and about the world. And that's kind of too bad, because that's an area where we really need to be detached. I think because from my point of view, we're not doing that well, and we need to do a lot better. And I don't think you can learn new information from inside a religious perspective or a fundamentalist perspective. I think people who are fundamentalists think they already know it.